Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldron. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? We are on what is effectively, once again, April 2nd, 2018. I guess that makes it Easter Monday. We mused a little bit about whether or not that ought to be a holiday or not on Friday. And then, of course, when I finished up the show on Friday, I suddenly realized at the end that I had promised that I would be delivering something for Monday, and I wasn't really sure what it was going to be, except I knew it wouldn't be a live show. There's just too much at this point, I think, to leave it to reruns, and of course it would be like getting a broadcast from another planet. If I used a year-old rerun even inside of the Trump administration's tenure, it would be ridiculous and out of date. And like traveling through a time machine, which is sometimes a fun thing to do, but I guess it's easier in more normal times. And of course, I wouldn't feel as guilty in normal times about leaving out so many stories because things are generally calm and on an even keel and an even trajectory, and we'll get to those things. But now, with things exploding every 5 minutes and going in different directions and everything under investigation and wanting to stay ahead of that and just other outrages, I thought I might as well just go right ahead and put together a Monday show for you. And I was actually thinking I might start with something that I mentioned at the end of Friday's show and left you a link for to read over the weekend. But, you know, it's a busy weekend and a holiday weekend at that. And so I thought maybe I should just read it myself in case you didn't get to it over the weekend, because I thought it was interesting and relevant to a lot of things we said on Friday, which for me is now, and for you was the end of last week, and you may still be wondering about it, because maybe you just listened to the Friday podcast. It was Adam Davidson's short tweet storm. He's a New Yorker staff writer, and let's see, I've got this tweet storm from when? March 29th, so that would have been last Thursday. Yesterday for me. One of the great challenges, he writes, and I think this ties up a lot of what we talked about on Friday, the way Trump world works, left hand not having an idea what the right hand is doing in a number of instances. We talked about it in the context of Scott Pruitt at that point just having been busted on his weirdo rental deal, paying $50 a night, but only on nights that he stayed at the townhouse on Capitol Hill owned by the lobbyist power couple. And the White House's lack of information ahead of time about what Pruitt and probably every other cabinet secretary was doing, because they just didn't care or didn't know that there were so many problems that they could run into. And if they did know, they didn't care about it because some reason. Well, this might explain some of it. Adam Davidson's tweet storm says, one of the great challenges of covering the Trump organization, and I think we all kind of agree that Donald Trump, to the extent that he runs the Trump administration, thinks he's just running another Trump organization project. One of the great challenges of covering the Trump organization is that nobody, not one person, knew all the things Trump was doing and had agreed to. We definitely see that happening inside the Trump administration. Each deal, each business idea was assigned to somebody who wouldn't tell others. And by way of illustrating what he's talking about and where he's coming from, he includes here in a tweet from David Axelrod, who says about what, I don't know, but things in general. Here's the bottom line. POTUS, meaning Donald Trump, who believes he's POTUS. POTUS believes his instincts got him to where he is, and he should continue to follow them. POTUS is tired of people telling him what to do. On now to the next tweet in the tweet storm. The currency of Trump world was, back in the Trump organization days, was proximity to the boss and the number of boss-assigned projects people handled. Trump was the only person who was aware of all the things he had assigned. But His memory was lousy and his attention to detail non-existent. We certainly see that continuing into the present day. This was perhaps a smart way to run a business built on shady deals. It's how the mob has been run at times, but it is terrifying for it to be the way the White House is run. If Trump has no chief of staff, there is essentially no government, no administration. There will be people empowered by the president who will be acting at cross purposes to others. The president, of course, acts at cross purposes to himself very frequently. But there you have it. And we're already seeing it manifest itself every day. There will be people empowered by the president who will be acting at cross purposes to others. They will make commitments to allies. I mean, this is serious stuff. They'll make commitments to allies and enemies of the U.S., not knowing others are making contradictory commitments. This is why typically in a normal situation, the gears of government turn slowly. You check on every moving part that you can think of to make sure that you're not doing this. But Trump, A, doesn't know he's supposed to do that. B, doesn't care that he's supposed to do that. C, thinks it's a management tool not to do that. See tweet 1, where Axelrod is saying, the guy thinks it's his instincts that have got him where he is today and that they are successful instincts. He thinks he's done a good job as heading the Trump organization, which I guess we've hinted at before. You know, many people have said if he had just taken his father's inheritance left to him and invested it in mutual funds, he'd be worth more money. So it's pretty objectively true. He's not a good businessman. Plus, of course, there's the record of spectacular failure after spectacular failure, and he's a dumbass. I mean, it's pretty obvious to anybody with any sense. He thinks he's done well. He thinks that in order to continue to do well, he ought to do the same thing that he's always done, and he keeps bragging on it. We keep hearing him say, I like chaos, okay? I like the whatever it is. He says he's doing it on purpose. And that doesn't really work, even for the Trump organization. And so it also won't work for administering the government of the United States of America. But you can't tell this guy anything, and he doesn't think he's wrong about anything. And, of course, whatever. I mean, Trump and his supporters tried to come up with real meaning to covfefe. So if you can believe that happened, then you can believe this is happening, and that there's no telling them the truth about this stuff. Right. So there will be people empowered by the president who will be acting at cross purposes to others. They will make commitments to allies and enemies of the U.S., not knowing others are making contradictory commitments. Trump, without a chief of staff, is the end, or at best, a temporary pause on a coherent American government. Of all the scary things, Trump unstaffed may be the scariest. Remember, the President of the United States has unique constitutional powers, and that's true, and you should deeply understand them if you're going to occupy the office, although my complaint for a lot of people from a lot of different parties, well, two, don't always fully understand what I think they ought to understand about their constitutional powers, but we differ. But we at least are living in the same universe usually, although George W. Bush took us, I thought, very far out of that. So remember, the President of the United States has unique constitutional powers, even if you don't go all Cheney on the topic, and his word is essentially policy. That is why there are 5,000 people in the office of the president ensuring that power is coherently applied. This is very much relevant to what we talked about on Friday, and of course ought to talk about every day. If the president tells one aide to promise, let's say, a deal with Kim Jong-un, and tells another aide to make an incompatible and contradictory promise to the South Koreans, both are official U.S. policy and only the president can adjudicate. But the president is likely to be the only sentient adult on earth unable to see that his policies are contradictory. This is how wars begin. This is how nations collapse. This is how alliances fray and enmities grow. Look at all of Trump's past business partners. There are few, very few, that stuck with him for more than a deal or two because he destroyed each relationship. That's funny when applied to some development project. It's apocalyptic when applied to a superpower. And by the way, this also applies to his lawyers, which is why you're seeing his lawyers abandon him now. We already knew that this was the history of Donald Trump. We already knew that lawyers refuse to work with the guy. You can't ask him questions about the case. You can't prepare to work on a case without witnesses in the meeting because he'll lie to his own attorneys. Again, funny when it's a development project and not so funny when applied to a superpower. The most hopeful outcome, the tweet storm continues, the most hopeful outcome is that people in the U.S. and around the world simply ignore the president and don't grant his statements the status of policy. That is probably the best way we can survive the next 3 to 8 years, reminding us that it is possible that he could be reelected. But it's a terrible transformation of our system. It's really the destruction, of course, of our entire system. And, that might be good advice. Simply stop granting his statements the status of policy. His reaction, by the way, to that, if it were to happen, in terms of the functionality of government, people just saying that's not the policy, I'm not going to go forward with it, is that he will accuse people who do that of being, quote unquote, the deep state, who and being out to obstruct him for political reasons, etc. And it is for political reasons. I think it's a good idea that the United States federal government continue to be able to administer the country and maintain America's status as one of the remaining superpowers of the world, or just, even if we're working under reduced status, don't start any nuclear wars. Don't do anything that could throw the populace into chaos or mass poverty. That's what I'm about. That doesn't mean I'm the deep state. It just means you said I should set off a dynamite charge in the basement of the White House, and I declined to do so. Okay. Deep state. Call it whatever you want. Anyway, that's probably the best way we can hope to survive the next 3 to 8 years. He finally winds it up with one last tweet. Oh, what the hell? I'm sure it'll turn out fine. What's the worst that could happen? And that's the end of the tweet storm. Plenty of reaction to it. He goes back and forth with a few people in the comments, but I thought that was a great way of summarizing what we had heard on Friday, but every day of the Trump administration. And you'll need to keep it in mind every day going forward. It'll explain an awful lot, and then you'll know more about what the hell is happening to America and around the world. Okay. Any number of other directions that we can go, ought to go, missed the opportunity to go on Friday. Shall we stick with Trump as a theme just for a moment? Sure, why not? And fill out some more time with important stuff that Donald Trump did that we didn't get a chance to make fun of, but just goes to show, one, how idiotic the guy is, and another, here, you want some examples of what he was just talking about, of one hand not knowing what the other is doing, of him not being smart enough to administer a machinery this large. All you got to do is take one look at an unreconstructed transcript of the things Donald Trump says in public when people put a camera and a microphone in front of him. This time, a minute-by-minute recap of Donald Trump's rambling Ohio infrastructure, and that is in scare quotes, speech, infrastructure, quote-unquote, speech. I didn't even realize he had given one, but apparently that was done on Thursday, and I didn't know about it until after the show on Friday, even though Daniel Dale covered it, and that would normally be a first stop on any morning roundup. And so I see a picture here. It's in a warehouse type setting somewhere along the line. I see Ivanka in a trench coat in the background, so she tagged along for the flight. And how exciting. A picture of Trump giving this speech. I didn't realize we were back on Infrastructure Week last week, or maybe this week is Infrastructure Week, and I don't know about it yet. I'm glad that we didn't really watch much of the speech, or people didn't talk very much about it. But, maybe we're taking the advice finally to stop paying attention. But anyway, I didn't know about the speech, and by the time I did the show on Friday, Trump was already at the golf course in Florida once again. And so you could excuse me for perhaps missing it. Let's see. Subheaded here. Among other things, the President of the United States boasted about the ratings for Roseanne. He used his time to do that. Very good. Explained he doesn't know what a community college is. Why did he say that? And threatened South Korea, because they're our ally, over upcoming nuclear talks with North Korea, who is our enemy. But what the hell? Why would left hand want to know what the right hand was doing, right? I like chaos, okay? So again, Daniel Dale reporting this one on Thursday. Until his speech on Thursday afternoon, U.S. President Donald Trump, thank you for telling us who he is. Remember, though, Daniel writes for the Canadian paper, The Star. U.S. President Donald Trump had not made any public remarks all week. Yeah, he was napping, I guess. He had a lot to say, and most of it was false, strange, outlandish, or confusing. The speech to Ohio workers was supposed to be about infrastructure, because it was infrastructure week again. But we know by now that Trump's supposed infrastructure events are almost never actually about infrastructure. As usual, he meandered freely to make dramatic statements about the Middle East and the Koreas, to disparage Hillary Clinton, to declare his ignorance of what a community college is, and eventually to express excitement about the ratings of the sitcom Roseanne. Here's what happened. 2:09 p.m. Going back to last Thursday, Trump begins with a reference to his election victory. What a group. Remember, you can't win unless you win the state of Ohio, right? Yeah. 12:13 p.m. Trump says of Democrats, they want people to come in from the border. And they I can't imagine they want, but certainly drugs are flowing across borders. We need walls. 2:14 p.m. Next minute. Trump falsely claims that a California project to replace a section of existing border wall, a project proposed in 2009, and entirely separate from his own proposed new wall, is indeed his own wall project. And then he brags about how this wall is a high-quality wall because of his own talents as a builder. We started building our wall. I'm so proud of it. We started. We have $1.6 billion. And we've already started. You saw the pictures yesterday. And I said, what a thing of beauty. And on September 28th, we go further. And we're getting that sucker built. And you think that's easy? People said, oh, he's giving up on the wall. Now, I never give up. I never. And you saw those beautiful pictures. And the wall looks good. It's properly designed. That's what I do. Is I build. I was always very good at building. It was always my best thing. Sucks ass at it. But okay. 2:16 p.m. Trump says the U.S. has been treated better on trade by its enemies than its allies. Frankly, our friends did more damage to us than our enemies because we didn't deal with our enemies. We dealt with our friends, and we dealt incompetently. And now, still same minute now, 2:16 p.m. That was a Hillary Clinton special, I hate to say it, Trump says of the existing free trade agreement with South Korea, which was negotiated by the George W. Bush administration and then revised by the Obama administration. 2 minutes later, 2:18 p.m., one day after his administration boasted of the successful completion of a revised trade agreement with South Korea, Trump says, I may hold it up till after a deal is made with North Korea. Does everybody understand that? You know why, right? You know why? Because it's a very strong card. And I want to make sure everyone is treated fairly and we're moving along very nicely with North Korea. We'll see what happens. Everything that he doesn't have any freaking idea what he's talking about ends with, we'll see what happens. What? So again, left hand, negotiate trade deal with Korea. Right hand, you know what? Let's not implement. I might hold that up. I made a promise to them, but I might hold that up because something. No one knows. We'll see what happens. 2:19, a minute later. Trump says the media, the fake news, would have accused him of exaggerating if he had claimed 3 million jobs would be created between Election Day and today. In fact, slightly more jobs were created over the previous 16-month period under Obama. Okay. 2:21 p.m. Trump, I guess the facts must have been that, the report was that 3 million jobs were created between Election Day, November 2016, and today, March 2018. 3 million jobs created, but under the same, so comparable period, more jobs created under Obama under the same 16-month period, but whatever. Okay, I get you now. 2:21 p.m. We are 2 minutes later. Trump makes his midterm election pitch, telling voters that they cannot afford to jeopardize the strong economy by voting for Democrats. You know the expression from, I guess it was Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid? Well, it is the economy. Okay. 2:24, 3 minutes later, Trump falsely claims we got rid of the bump stocks. The bump stocks are now under very strict control. His administration's proposed ban on the firearms device has not been finalized. It will be accepting public comments on the proposal until June 27th. Then he falsely claims nobody reported it. It doesn't get reported. Well, of course it did. It hasn't happened yet. 1 minute after that, Trump says, I've been in construction and building all my life. I love it. I love the smell of a construction site, right? There's just something about it. Wow, very informative. 2:28 p.m., 3 minutes after that, Trump brings up Clinton again in boasting of his decision to approve the Keystone XL oil pipeline from Alberta. Hillary wasn't going to approve it. Nobody was. It was a dead project. I got in almost like right at the beginning. I approved that. A minute later at 2:29, Trump falsely says nobody protested his approval of the Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline. Nobody. I approved it. The pickets, they picked up their stuff and they left, and that was the end of it. In fact, North Dakota protesters were ordered to leave by the governor, and about 20 were arrested for refusing to do so. 3 minutes later, at 2:32 p.m., Trump returns to his prepared text for a moment, saying nearly 40% of our bridges were built before, think of this, before the first moon landing. He then laments that another country, some country, is currently building 29 bridges. Is that a big deal? I don't even know why he would be so excited about that. He says he will not name this country because it is, quote, friendly to me. I don't want to embarrass anybody by saying they're building 29 bridges. What? Okay. Didn't realize that was a problem. Trump complains that TransCanada Corporation was not sufficiently grateful for his decision to approve Keystone XL. And I just say to myself, can you imagine the boss of whatever the hell company it is who never actually called me to say thank you? But that's okay. We'll remember. So this guy's sitting behind his beautiful chair in a certain place. He means desk, I'm sure. I know exactly where. Nice place. Big company. Shame if something was to happen to it, boss. Right? I mean, what does this mean? I know exactly where. Nice place. Big company. And the consultants march into his office to tell him what a great job they did. They were dead. They had no chance. They failed. I got it approved. He wants a cut of the money, I guess. In fact, TransCanada Chief Executive Russ Girling thanked Trump twice in person in the Oval Office with cameras rolling. So, why bother actually figuring that one out? Okay, very interesting. Let's see. What else have we got here? 2:34. Trump complains that the U.S. spends money, quote, building up foreign countries while allowing its own infrastructure to fall into disrepair. Well, it's always infrastructure week. Why are we falling into disrepair? He specifically complains about U.S. support for South Korea. That comes up again. Look at Korea. We have a border at Korea. We have a wall of soldiers. We don't get paid very much for this, do we? You look at that, nobody comes through. But our own border, we don't take care of it. Think of it. We spent billions of dollars in other countries maintaining their borders, and we can't maintain our borders in our own country. Is there something a little bit wrong with that? Think of it. We spend billions and billions of dollars. Look, North and South Korea. 32,000 soldiers. The finest equipment. Barbed wire all over the place. We protect that whole thing. Nobody comes through. But our country, we don't do it. Things are changing, folks. He wants everybody to know. Wow, what a comparison. 2:34 p.m., just before we head off into our break. Trump falsely claims that he was opposed to the Iraq War from the beginning. He haltingly supported the war. Of course, when radio host Howard Stern asked him in 2002, saying, yeah, I guess so. I wish the first time it was done correctly. Yeah, well, anybody who actually remembers what his so-called position was on the Iraq War probably remembers that correctly. And one of the many things that, well, we've been reminded any number of times about his ridiculous approach to the Iraq War. Anyway, time for our first break. We'll break away for 2 minutes and come back, and let's see. We'll see how much more of this there is, how much more of this we can take, and move on to a few other topics in the time we have left. And luckily, there's lots of it. We'll be back, as I said, after 2 minutes, and sum this up and then move on to the next horror story. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. When we left off just before the break, we were reading through Daniel Dale's minute-by-minute transcripting, essentially, highlighting, I guess, of Trump's so-called infrastructure speech to Ohio workers given last Thursday. And I'm kind of glad to say that we really didn't notice very much about this speech. I didn't even realize he was giving it. That's nice. I probably should have left well enough alone, but as always, it makes for good fodder on the radio to see just how stupid the guy is and what he's up to from time to time. And it does give us an opportunity to illustrate Adam Davidson's quick explanation of Trumpism and how it works, and to show it to you in action as we read Davidson's tweet storm out at the top of the show. So here's a great example of, again, left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing and it having serious implications for American foreign policy. There was, of course, the Korea situation, and here he's deciding, I'm going to hold up a trade agreement, a renegotiated trade agreement with South Korea for some unknown reason, because it's a good card to get them to bend in the negotiations with North Korea, which ordinarily, wouldn't, why bother discussing when things were normal? I mean, wouldn't any Republican presidential candidate have hit the roof to find out that a Democratic president was saying, yeah, I might leverage It might use some kind of leverage against South Korea to get them to agree with some term that I guess that the North Koreans want in negotiations about their nuclear ambitions. I can't imagine what they would do with a Democratic president who admitted as much. But, old story. Anyway, once again, other dangers in international relations and international politics for the United States crop up at 2:34 p.m., which is even in the same minute as he's been speaking on the Korea situation. Trump falsely claims, there was that he was opposed to the Iraq war from the beginning. We did do that one. And then on 2:35, he follows that one up by saying Trump appears to ad-lib a major foreign policy declaration that is at odds with his administration's stated policy. Here it is. He's claiming, with no details, of course, because there aren't any, he's just making it up right off the cuff, that he will withdraw the U.S. military from Syria. When? Very soon. Very soon. Probably 2 weeks, let's say. Within 2 weeks. He doesn't actually go ahead and say the 2 weeks line, but imagine this. Is everybody caught by surprise by this? Yeah, sure, but I like chaos. Well, nobody else does, a-hole, so cut it out. But, you want to do that. You want to have a coherent policy. Well, you're the deep state and everybody hates you. And the coal miners wanted me to wreck the world. I know that. Anyway, so why would he pull the U.S. out of Syria? Here's why. By the way, which doesn't mean it's a different topic at all, we're knocking the hell out of ISIS. We'll be coming out of Syria very soon. Let the other people take care of it now. Very soon. Very soon. We're coming out. We're going to have 100% of the caliphate, as they call it, sometimes referred to as land. That's so horrifying on multiple levels. One, you can be forgiven not knowing what are the implications of the word when it's used, of caliphate and whatever the Arabic root of it is, our anglicized version of it, caliphate. Okay, it's not just land. What a way of putting it. But okay, a very specific way of administering conquered territory, yes, or even, whatever, ceded territory, whatever territory you might have. But I love that equation there. We're going to have 100% of the caliphate, as they call it, sometimes referred to as land. We've taken it all back quickly. But we're going to be coming out of there real soon. We're going to get back to our country where we belong, where we want to be, in what we call here in the United States, what we call land, as opposed to we're going to put our military in the ocean, which is just one of the things we want to do. You know why? People say to me constantly, they're saying all the time, Donald, if you dump troops into the ocean, into the middle of the open ocean, they'll very likely would drown. Some of them are great swimmers, by the way. Some of them are Olympic caliber swimmers. But, we're not putting them in the Olympics. And you know why? Because America hates patriots. That's why. Seriously, listen to me on this one. The United States Olympic Committee would rather lose the Olympics than honor our troops. Can you believe that? It's true. Here in America. Can you believe that? So they tell me anyway. That's beside the point. Forget that. What I wanted to tell you was, people are telling me all the time, Donald, if you bring the troops back from Syria by ships, and we do this sometimes, we have this terrific, wonderful, fantastic United States Navy completely filled with boats. Everybody in the Navy on a boat. It's amazing what goes on. I had a friend, by the way, who had a beautiful boat, used to take it over to the south of France all the time. Very rarely honored the men and women of the United States military on that boat. Can you believe it? He had the audacity, by the way. There's a $10 word for you. I can buy a lot of $10 words, believe me. All the $10 words. I could own them. That's something I could be doing, but I don't need to do that. I let who I let have those words? The fake news. Big mistake on my part. Probably the biggest mistake I ever. I should have bought all the words. Anyway, my friend used to go on his boat to the south of France all the time. Had the audacity to fly the American flag on that boat. Not a single general, not a Marine to be found, not even a United States Navy SEAL. And they are cute, by the way, the SEALs. Fantastic. Not only can they fight a war anywhere and defeat any enemy, they knock the hell out of ISIS. Can you imagine being able to knock the hell out of ISIS and reclaim the whole caliphate, which is land, as I was saying, just to get back to my original point, while balancing a ball on your nose? Right. So you tell me. And is there a better deal in the world than getting them to do that for fish, by the way? I don't think so. I'm the greatest deal maker in history. So if you're going to drop your army in the middle of the ocean, were you paying attention, folks? Because that's what this was about. They'll likely drown despite the fact that they're pretty good, Olympic champion level swimmers, like the SEALs. You see that on TV all the time. You put American soldiers in the ocean, that's no good. That's not going to work. That you can't conquer land, right? And we all want to conquer land, I think. It's good to conquer oceans because that's what's in between pieces of land, and you want to be able to control that stuff. But if you bring them back to America's land, that is when we get real freedom, okay? Just wanted to let you know that. That was a pretty long rant, but as it turns out, just 1 minute later, 2:36 p.m., I'm doing my own narration now. Do you like it? It's pretty good, right? Trump falsely claims, I'm going to speak about myself in the third person, and I'm going to pretend I'm lying fake news guy Daniel Dale. Trump falsely claims for the 9th time in office, it's a world record, by the way, that the U.S. has spent $7 trillion on Middle East wars. One Brown University estimate, by the way, and let me tell you something, that's the right color for that university, I can tell you right now. Brown University estimate put the current total at $4.3 trillion, and the total including estimated future costs at $5.6 trillion, which, is more than $7 trillion. Thank you for proving my point. Trump then says, quote, nobody ever heard of the word trillion until 10 years ago. I invented it. It's my word, trillion. It's a word for more than billion, and some people call it land. Okay, so that's the end of that. What in the flipping world are you talking about? Nobody ever heard of the word trillion. All right, fine. 2:38 p.m., Trump advocates a war crime, saying that the U.S. should have seized Iraqi oil for itself. And you know what we have for it? The war? Nothing. Remember, I used to say, keep the oil. We never kept the oil. If we kept the oil, we would have been okay. If we kept the oil, we wouldn't have ISIS. They kept the oil. We didn't keep the oil. Stupid. Well, he is stupid. He's correct about that. 2:39 p.m., a minute later, Trump expresses confusion about all of the judicial vacancies that greeted him upon entering office. I didn't even understand. Imagine that, right? Of course, we know how that happened, the Senate, etc., but never mind all that. I don't know why Obama left that. It was like a big, beautiful present to all of us. Why in the hell did he leave it? Maybe he got complacent. What happened? How did he do that? What happened, of course, was the Senate Republicans refused to approve Obama's judicial nominees. But he had nothing to do with that. Same minute, still 2:39 p.m., Trump explains what judges are. Thank you. Although, to be honest, Vox might have done the same thing. We were left judges. They're the ones that judge all your disputes, in case you didn't know. Well, they judge, he didn't say in case you didn't know, but you might as well have thrown it in there. They judge on what's fair, on the environment, and what's not fair. 2:41 p.m., Trump complains of an international program in which wealthy countries help developing countries cover the cost of transitioning to cleaner energy. As far as I'm concerned, we're developing. Pay us some money, right? Pay us. We're developing. You're cleaning up the air for the entire planet. That's the benefit of it to you. But no, I want some money. Why? Why should the United States be paid for that? I'll tell you why. Because if they get paid in the United States Treasury, I, as the president, can take that money and keep it. I don't know if you know that. That's in the Constitution. 2:43 p.m., Trump says of the Department of Veterans Affairs before his presidency, they had sadists that treated our vets horribly, worse than a movie, which is, of course, the ultimate in his mind. 2:45 p.m., Trump says he does not know what a community college is. I was curious about why. Why say that? Why not pretend you do know what a community college is? Well, he says community colleges should be called vocational schools, though those are entirely different things. And here, the unfrozen caveman grandpa emerges. He hasn't known anything about anything since the 1980s. So I don't know why even in the 80s, we knew what community colleges were. But okay, when I was growing up, so here we're talking about he's frozen in the 60s. When I was growing up, we had what was called vocational schools. They weren't called community colleges because I don't know what that means, a community college. To me, it means a 2-year college. I don't know what it means, but I know what vocational, that's the sentence, but I know what vocational. And I tell people, call it vocational from now on. It's a great word. It's a great word. Another one of the $10 words I've bought. And I bought it for $11, which is a great deal. It's a great word. Call it vocational and technical perhaps, but use vocational because that's what it's all about. People know what that means. We don't know what community college means. I would suggest to you that it's probably the opposite, but okay. There's Ivanka. Oh, and Tiffany is behind her, looking at him with, I don't know what. I mean, you can't see Tiffany's face, of course, because why would they have that? But you can see Ivanka's, and it might be pride, it might be pity. I'm not really sure what's going on. Here, Trump gives a rare shout-out at 2:46 to his daughter Tiffany, standing behind her better-known sister, Ivanka. Then 2:49, a period of relative calm. He hasn't lied since, or said something totally stupid since 2:45. It's now 2:49. Trump complains about an unnamed road in an unnamed state, which he says has been made too curvy. President of the United States. That's what's on his mind. There's a road, and it's so curvy, I'm telling you. I don't know where it is, or what the road is called, or how curvy it is, or if it's a road, or it might be in the ocean. But it is so curvy, I don't even know what to say. Not good, this is the quote, not good if you're not feeling so good behind the wheel. Got to straighten it out because, I don't feel good. Useless information. I mean, I'm glad he reported it, Dale, but useless thing to say. An unknown. Do you know that this road is so curvy that if you're on it, you're going to have to go around these curves, and it might mean you don't feel so good. Infrastructure week, boom, ladies and gentlemen. There's a road that upset my stomach, and I'm telling you, I won't tell you where the road is or where it goes, or what I ate that day, but I might have had my stomach upset. This is what the workers in Ohio are like, what the are you talking about, man? Oh, my God. 2:51 p.m., 2 minutes later. Trump says, America built the Empire State Building in 1 year. Think of it, 1 year. That's actually like 9 months. It's actually, I was afraid that he was saying, you know what a year is? It's 9 months. Of course, it's 12, but he says, no, it was less than a year. He actually built the Empire State Building in 9 months. Can you believe that? It didn't. It was 13 months that it took him to build it, and that's remarkable in its own right. It's not under a year. It's also not 9 months, but okay. 2:54 p.m. That's 3 whole minutes. He hasn't said something remarkably stupid enough for Daniel Dale to write it down, or maybe he had to go to the bathroom. I don't know. Trump says America's infrastructure is, like in many cases, a third world country with curvy roads and stomach upset. 2:56 p.m., Trump suggests he deserves some credit. For what now? the SpaceX rocket launch. Sure, why not? By the way, for like one of the big promoters of privatization of everything, Donald Trump is likely to join the pantheon of privatizers. But as president, he wants credit for privatized stuff that goes on while he's the president. Why the SpaceX rocket launch should be credited to him? I'm president of the United States. Everything. Let me tell you something about the way the United States of America works, in case you didn't know this. It's like a multi-level marketing situation. You ever heard of one of those things? People like to say they're scams, and they are scams, and I'm okay with that because I'm at the top of those scams. But if you're at the bottom, then it's not a scam. Okay? Just keep paying. By the way, I saw a great video the other day of him pitching for multi-level marketing scam based on telecom. ACN, was that it? It's just hilarious to watch him do this pitch from a couple of years ago. And by the way, one of the more telling things about it is he's reading it off a teleprompter, and he's not squinting like he does with his Saturday video address. They should just get a bigger teleprompter. I don't know why they can't fix that. But that's not my problem. Anyway, he thinks, obviously, that the United States of America is a multi-level marketing scheme. And as president, he sits at the top. So anytime anything happens, public or private, that is a success, it A, should credit him, and B, probably give him some money. So here he is, I deserve credit for the SpaceX rocket launch and landing in February. He also suggests that he doesn't think the government should fund such rocket programs, and they didn't. And incongruously, he takes credit for reviving the government's space agency, NASA. We shouldn't be doing the rockets. But let me tell you something. I love NASA, and I paid extra money for NASA, by which I mean, of course, I used your money for it, but I deserve the credit. Did you know that I've been on the moon myself and Mars? I discovered Mars. Thank you for thanking me. We must recapture the excitement of creation, the spirit of innovation. I don't know what I get creation as innovation, right? Okay. And the spark of invention. That was in his speech, obviously, because he would never say the spark of anything. We're starting. You saw the rocket the other day. You see what's going on with cars. You see what's going on with so much. NASA, space agency. All of a sudden, it's back. You notice? It was dormant for many, many years. Now it's back. And we're trying to have the private sector invest the money. Why the hell should we do it, right? Let them invest. If they want to send rocket ships up, they're rich. Let them do it. But I did it because with your tax money, because NASA, right? Everybody loves rockets, except the people who hate rockets, which is all of you. You all both hate and love rockets, and you want them done privately and publicly, because who the hell wants to go to the moon? Everybody. Right? So screw it. Nobody wants to go to the moon. That's the speech. He just gave that speech. Trump tells workers at 2:58 p.m., you're restoring pride in this country again. Our country had very little pride. Look back. See what was happening. Our country had very little pride. And of course what that means, I want to make America great again, right? I want America to have pride like it used to. Like it used to, right? When we didn't have pride. That's what he just said. Our country has very little pride. Look back. You'll see. No pride. I want to bring us back to those days when we had so much pride. 2:59 p.m. Trump is building up to his big conclusion, but he gets distracted by a thought in his head. Huh. There it is rattling around in there. It's about the revival of the sitcom Roseanne, starring Roseanne Barr as a Trump supporter. Even look at Roseanne. I called her yesterday. Look at her ratings. Look at her ratings. I got a call from Mark Burnett. He did The Apprentice. He's a great guy. He said, Donald, I just called to say hello and to tell you, did you see Roseanne's ratings? I said, Mark, how big were they? They were unbelievable. Over 18 million people. And it wasn't about us. They haven't figured it out. The fake news hasn't quite figured it out yet. They haven't figured it out. So that was great. And they haven't figured it out. But they will. And when they do, they'll become much less fake. May take a while, but it's happening. Roseanne is going to fix the fake news problem. There you go. It's a fake show, mean, it's a real show, but it's a show about a fake family, but it's kind of realistic, and they'll fix the fake news, which I don't know. 3 p.m. finally, Trump hastily pivots to his conclusion because he's got to get back. I want to get the hell out of here. I'm in Ohio. Can you believe it? My steak is waiting for me back at home. 2 scoops of ice cream. Because I'm the president. I'm at the top. Everybody has to send me a scoop of ice cream in the mail. That's the way multi-level marketing works. But here's the big conclusion. But you're the ones who are truly making America great again. I'm just the one eating the ice cream for you. You're the ones who are truly making America great again. We're going to work together. We're going to work with the state of Ohio. We're going to work with everybody, in case I've made a mistake and I'm not in Ohio. We're going to work with everybody, and we're going to bring our country to a level of success and prominence and pride like it has never, ever seen before. Thank you, and God bless America in ways that he never, ever has before. All right. That wraps it up. And the final illustration of the thing, of course, is Trump having gotten away with giving Hope Hicks, how does she do it? A kiss, presumably on the cheek, before she takes off from the White House for good. This was before leaving for his Ohio speech. And by the way, one of the funnier tweets about that I had seen, he is wearing his giant overcoat at the moment, and he's standing on the porch, the back, is this the portico? No, that's in the front. The back porch, I guess, over at the White House, and the shrubbery is hiding his feet. So he's in his giant overcoat, and as somebody points out, it looks like he's a giant hand puppet. Dressing like a hand puppet to own the libs, everybody. Not that anybody has ever referred to him as a puppet before. Get it? Wow. All right, man. I know that was a long time to spend on it, but sometimes it's just so spectacular to see how much crap he can stuff into 1 hour of talking to people who are going to cheer for him regardless, I guess. So he just feels like, what the hell? I'll just say anything. All right, so shifting gears just for a moment, right before our second break, from the Donald himself to one of the corrupt cabinet secretaries that we spoke about on Friday. We left off on Friday with the newest information on Scott Pruitt and his weird rental situation, the townhouse that he was renting from, you remember the whole way this story set up, an LLC co-owned by the wife of another lobbyist who lobbied the EPA, et cetera, et cetera. And, anyway, we left it on Friday, which, of course, for me was earlier today, but for you was last week, by saying, it would be hard to imagine Trump finding a lackey as pliable as Pruitt for his environmental agenda, and so he probably wasn't going to fire him over it, although it was reported on Friday that the White House was really exasperated with yet another burgeoning scandal. Anyway, during the rest of the day, Pruitt's situation worsened. Every hour, it seemed like there was a new revelation about this bizarro situation. And I don't think on Friday's show that we even got to what I think might have been the situation that ended up revealing the whole arrangement in the first place. There was a story, let me see, I think ABC News has this story that at some point, remember that Pruitt maintains this enormous oversized security detail, a little bit of auto-playing video we'll get rid of there. He runs with like a 25-person security detail. You remember that story? At one point, he's staying in the condo, and somehow his security detail, I don't know whether they're trying to get in touch with him or they lose contact with him, and they cannot raise him on the telephone, and he's not answering the door, and they become concerned that he is, they in their mind, they've realized, oh my God, he's unconscious and unresponsive in the house, and we got to get in there to check on the safety of the secretary. He's the EPA secretary. Really, honestly, if the EPA administrator passes away in their sleep, I mean, sad for the family and all, but and for America or whatever, we don't wish it on him or anything. I'm just saying, America's not going to collapse if the EPA administrator passes away in their sleep. But, you know, you want to take care of the guy. I don't know if that's really the job of security, because no EPA administrator's ever had a security detail like that before. But okay, they decide it's their job to kick the door in on the building and, you know, smash their way in to rescue the secretary from I don't know what exactly. So they do that. And I guess they must have basically trashed the place, or they caused some significant damage. ABC News was reporting on all this, along with the fact, by the way, that they did find out who was living in the second bedroom. I think we left that on Friday's show. It was had yet to be discovered. It turns out it was his daughter, McKenna. McKenna Pruitt was living in the other room while she was interning at the White House, which, you know, by itself is not the worst thing that I've ever heard anyway, but it was a little unusual that didn't break up. But anyway, so the security team, I don't know where McKenna was. Maybe she had returned from her internship and went back to Oklahoma at that point, smashes down the door and gets into the condo. And I don't really even know what happens after that, but it turns out later on, ABC News is reporting that, what ends up happening is the EPA ends up reimbursing the property owner, I guess, for the damage to the door. And that's sort of where it's left at. And I'm waiting. I think maybe by Monday you'll have heard more about this. And I wouldn't be surprised if by Monday we found out, for instance, that it wasn't necessarily the case that Pruitt was merely staying there until he got his feet under him in Washington and got settled in Washington, D.C. But rather, he wanted to stay there longer and ended up getting kicked out by the landlord for damaging the property. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It feels like Kagro in the evening because, of course, for me it is. For you, it's not. Kagro in the Morning, unless, of course, you're listening to the podcast in the evening, in which case I had it right the first time and I should have just left well enough alone. At any rate, I just want to be clear, that was speculative information. That is to say, not information at all, but speculation that we will eventually find out that is the reason that Scott Pruitt left this sweetheart arrangement. Though I can't think of anything else that fits the fact pattern just now. But I'm wondering, by Monday, this may all be common knowledge. I'm just guessing, though, that at some point, these landlords, as nice as they were, had enough of this guy. Anyway, ABC News, I guess, puts the story this way. Let's see. You know what? I'm not certain whether I can find in this version of this. This is a version of the story at ABC News that has changed several times, and so it's not entirely clear if I have the correct version here. But it really was an amazing story. I'd love to know what exactly they thought the security detail thought was going on when he wasn't responding. I imagine that they thought, oh, he's had a heart attack or something like that. But what I'd really like to know is, did they ever discover, what was going on and what was happening? I mean, I think the reporting was that he was asleep, but like, why? What time was it? Why didn't that occur to his security detail that, it's 3:00 in the morning? He's probably asleep. What do we need to get in there for? I'm curious about what triggered their concern and why they were so insistent about it. Anyway, as it turns out, there's lots of interesting information. Just the way they tell the story is really rather amazing. Anyway, the story, again, continues to get worse and worse. The first development was that the daughter was there. And, of course, they reached out to try and get comment from her or from her mom about the story. And, she doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Doesn't want to answer questions. But one after another, these guys just keep answering questions, like we were saying on Friday. When they're pressed to explain themselves, they just can't do it, and they think like all you need to do is escape this questioning one question at a time, even if the answer to the second question renders the answer to the first question, previously answered question, inoperative by contradicting it. They don't seem to get that there's a cumulative thing going on here. We remember what your answer was from question 1. You can't just escape by giving us the opposite answer. And number 2, if you've been painted into a corner. Anyway, I wanted to bring it back up just because I think that there's some chance that by the time you hear the show on Monday, I'll be wrong about Trump's willingness to fire Pruitt. Walter Schaub, who of course used to be the director of the Office of Government Ethics, has put it this way. By mid-afternoon, he was tweeting, "Pruitt's situation is unraveling." The Washington Post now reports that the lobbyist Vicky Hart, who rented him the place at the sweetheart price of $50 a day, but only if he was staying there, says they're only casual friends and haven't spoken lately, which is probably not unusual. I believe that might be the case, or she's trying to distance herself from him, but either way, not so hard to believe, but that creates a legal problem. If they are casual friends and they haven't spoken lately, then there's no way that Pruitt can rely on claiming that there's enough of a personal relationship to give him an exception to the gift rule. That's going to be a real problem. You can sort of bypass the gift rules if the person is a close personal friend. We learned that from, well, all sorts of cases. The Bob McDonnell case and then, of course, the Bob Menendez case, both of which hinged on whether there was a real relationship there after all. And if she's saying, not so much, then it's going to be really hard to explain why a sweetheart deal like that isn't a huge ethics problem. Speaking of huge ethics problems, and I guess the failure to discover them coming down the pike or to foresee them before they actually happen, the Washington Post has an interesting story here. Robert O'Hara Jr. and Sean Boberg, I am sure we'll be talking about this in the future. And in fact, I think we've talked about some of the people in this story in the past. This story is called Behind the Chaos, Office That Vets Trump Appointees. Did you know that there even was one? Plagued by inexperience. Maybe you should... Who will vet the vetters? I guess is the question that underlies this one. An obscure White House office responsible for recruiting and vetting thousands of political appointees has suffered from inexperience and a shortage of staff, hobbling the Trump administration's efforts to place qualified people in key posts across government documents and interviews show. Yeah, that will probably be a problem. They're supposed to stay obscure, of course. If they do their jobs correctly, they'll remain in obscurity, as is proper for these folks, but I guess they haven't. At the same time, the story continues, 2 office leaders have spotty records themselves, and maybe that is what leads to some of the problems. A college dropout with arrests for drunken driving and bad checks, and a Marine Corps reservist with arrests for assault, disorderly conduct, fleeing an officer, and underage drinking. These are the heads of the office in charge of vetting everyone else. You see how that could be a problem? The Presidential Personnel Office, or PPO, is little known outside political circles, but it has far-reaching influence as a gateway for the appointed officials who carry out the president's policies and run federal agencies. Under President Trump, the office was launched with far fewer people than in prior administrations. It has served as a refuge for young campaign workers. They get placed there. I don't know what to do with you. Fine. We don't care who's working for the administration, so why don't we put you in charge of vetting people who work for the administration? I always pick the best people anyway, so there's really no vetting that's going to be necessary. You kids take a nap, and I'll just continue to pay you. And who would these kids be? These would be largely the privileged children of state party chairs, etc., who are early endorsers for Trump. At least one of them is known to us. And the name will come up in a few minutes. So, where were we? Yes, under President Trump, the office was launched with far fewer people than in prior administrations. It has served as a refuge for young campaign workers, a stopover for senior officials on their way to other posts, and a source of jobs for friends and family. A Washington Post investigation found one senior staffer has had 4 relatives receive appointments through the office. On the campaign trail, Trump pledged to surround himself, quote, only with the best and most serious people. Most serious, that's good. But his administration has been buffeted by failed appointments and vacancies in key posts. From the start, the office struggled to keep pace with its enormous responsibilities, with only about 30 employees on hand, less than a third of the staffing in prior administrations, the Post found. 6 senior officials over age 35 went elsewhere in government just months after their arrival, documents and interviews show. Since the inauguration, most of the staffers in the PPO have been in their 20s, some with little professional experience apart from their work on Trump's campaign, the Post found, and very often that was barely work to begin with. So basically, they've come in treating the PPO here. What's it stand for again? The Presidential Personnel Office is pretty much Trump's coalition provisional authority. People with enormous responsibility and no business shouldering it in the first place. All right, so from the start, let's see, they struggled. They had only about 30 employees, and anybody with any experience quickly moved on from there. Even as the demands to fill government mounted, the PPO offices on the first floor of the Eisenhower Executive Office building became something of a social hub where young staffers from throughout the administration stopped by to hang out on couches and smoke electronic cigarettes, known as vaping. Thanks very much for telling me. Current and former White House officials said. So what a fun hangout that must have been. It's just the Presidential Personnel Office, no big deal. PPO leaders hosted happy hours last year. That's not so bad. In their offices, that's not so good. That included beer, wine, and snacks for dozens of PPO employees and White House liaisons who work in federal agencies, White House officials confirmed. In January, they played a drinking game in the office called icing. Okay. To celebrate the deputy director's 30th birthday. Oh, come on, kids. Icing, I'm afraid to find out. Icing involves hiding a bottle of Smirnoff Ice, a flavored malt liquor, and demanding that the person who discovers it, in this case, the deputy director, guzzle it. That's the game. I don't think I get the game. You hide a bottle of Smirnoff Ice, and whoever finds it has to drink it. I guess they chug it. They drink it very quickly. For those of you following at home, yeah, the Vox Explainer. What does that mean? Chug it. Not every English-speaking country is going to view that the same way, by the way. I learned that in oddball and embarrassing fashion at one point in London several years ago. Anyway, that's not a game, but okay, fine. The White House confirmed that PPO officials played the icing game, but said it and the happy hours are not unique to the PPO and are a way to network and let off steam. Like Abu Ghraib. All right, so they're not unique. Everybody in the Trump administration is 20 years old and chugging Smirnoff Ice in the office. Little is publicly known or disclosed about the office's inner workings under Trump. The White House declined requests from the Post for details about the composition of the staff. The answer is drunk. That's really, what else do you need to know? The Post compiled the names of 40 current or former PPO officials under Trump and then examined their qualifications. That took about 5 minutes. Drawing on resumes, the White House salary disclosures for 2017, ethics filings, which are all wrong anyway, police reports, which you really shouldn't have to be consulting in this case, and other public records. Reporters interviewed presidential scholars and current and former officials in the Trump, Bush, and Obama administrations. The PPO is ultimately responsible for recruiting and vetting candidates for more than 4,000 jobs, more than 1,200 of them requiring Senate approval. Every White House faces personnel challenges and includes young and politically connected employees who get jobs through friends or family and senior officials who move on to other assignments. But the shortcomings of this office and Trump's appointment process in general are among the most pronounced, wow, that really popped, pronounced That was odd. The most pronounced in memory, according to presidential scholars. No administration has done it as poorly, okay, I'll stop with this, as the current one, said Max Stier, perhaps Stier, S-T-I-E-R, President and Chief Executive of the Partnership for Public Service. A big opportunity to pop those P's there, but a nonpartisan group that teamed up with the Post to track appointments. White House officials said the PPO is performing well, okay, even though they absolutely suck at their job. Even though they acknowledge the office, quote, is a much smaller PPO than at any time in recent history, and suckier. The officials asserted the office is working hard and starting to make progress on nominees for positions that require Senate confirmation. They provided statistics showing that the PPO and the president had sent forward 309 candidates for 343 separate Senate-approved positions in cabinet agencies as of March 1st. They blamed delays on slower background and ethics checks by the FBI and ethics officials, which they said now take an average of 111 days, much longer than in prior administrations, and that's because each one of these nominees has a rap sheet for drunk driving and domestic violence. But, it's surely the FBI is dragging their feet on this. Well, we have stacks of paperwork this high to go through on people. Normally they have clean records. They're solid citizens. They're upstanding individuals. These are thugs, bums, and, dip heads, let's say, dip S's from God knows where, the dregs of society, but with a suit, a tie, and a MAGA hat on. And, so they cleaned out fraternity basements around the country, and now they're having difficulty with things. Oh, boy, what a surprise. They also said, the White House did, that Democrats have used procedural maneuvers to stall nominations. And we have, but not for these idiots. The big names. I mean, for some of these too, but they're just incompetent. They should just admit it. All right. According to the White House calculations, Senate Democrats have called for record numbers of cloture votes that delayed nominations by extending debates. 79 in all, compared with 10 under Obama and 0 under George W. Bush. Now, we probably should have done some under George W. Bush, considering, wasn't there like a mining and mineral rights office of some kind that was likewise having just these ridiculous debauched parties in their office? At some point, we heard that news, but that's so long ago, like ancient history. And by the way, frankly, Democrats should be stalling even more on all of these people. Half of them are drunk drivers. Of course they're stalling. Not only is the FBI dragging its feet because they've got rap sheets, the Senate should be doing the same. This person has no business being nominated to this position, but without the filibuster, we know that you can eventually install any one of them in office. The longer we wait, the longer it takes to get to the point where the government collapses because this moron is drunk on the job. I mean, I would be stalling everything I could. Tie a bottle of Smirnoff Ice to a string and stick it in the office there and drag it along. And if you can prank these people, forget the Senate maneuvers, we'll bait rat traps with Smirnoff Ice, and these guys will be stuck and they won't be able to show up for their confirmation meetings. My tongue is caught in a rat trap. Why didn't you even use your hands to try to get this bottle? I can only imagine. All right, back to the real story. They also said they had filled 1,651 lower-level political appointments, a number that they said lagged only moderately behind President Barack Obama's 1,920 at a similar point. Despite historic obstruction from Democrats in Congress, the Presidential Personnel Office is filling the administration with the best and brightest appointees. Do you really have to gild the lily like that? The best and brightest employees who share the president's vision for the country, to the extent that it's double vision from drunkenness, said Raj Shah, you know that guy, White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary. Staff work tirelessly and have experience consistent with the practice of previous administrations. The Trump administration's number of appointments gaining Senate approval is way behind that of previous administrations since detailed record-keeping began in 1989, according to data maintained by the Partnership for Public Service. At the same point in their presidencies, March 29th of their second year, Obama had 548 approvals, George W. Bush had 615, compared to 387 for Trump. The Trump administration has received Senate approval for just 292 of 652 posts identified as key to the functioning of government, which is fine because this one doesn't function anyway. The administration has offered no nominations for another 217 key Senate-confirmed posts, including Director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the Ambassador to South Korea, for God's sake, in all of this. A number of Trump appointees have been embroiled in controversy and resigned their posts over questions about their qualifications, backgrounds, and comments. They include 24-year-old Taylor Wayaneth. Remember him? He lost his job as Deputy Chief of Staff at the Office of National Drug Control Policy after a Post account detailed his lack of experience and inaccurate claims on resumes submitted to the government. An internal memo shows that the PPO Deputy Director ordered that a senior civil servant in ONDCP be moved into another job to make way for Wayaneth's appointment. Wayaneth declined to comment for this article. Another appointee, Carl Higbee, stepped down in January from the federal agency that runs AmeriCorps after the media drew attention to remarks he made on internet radio that disparaged blacks, Muslims, gays, and women. It was all in one, I guess. He later said he regretted the remarks. Well, but that's not interesting. Of course he regrets them. He lost his job over it. James Pfiffner, P-F-I-F-F-N-E-R, a scholar of the presidency at George Mason University who has tracked appointments and presidential transitions since the mid-1970s, said prior PPOs were led and staffed by senior officials who understood the importance of personnel and had extensive experience, political connections, and knowledge of the executive branch. But F all of that, said Donald Trump. They were well-connected and wanted the government to work well. That's a big difference, I guess. Pfiffner said when he talked to the Post, they understood how to make government work well. The challenges in the presidential personnel office began with decisions Trump made months before he moved into the Oval Office. In 2016, Trump named New Jersey Governor Chris Christie the leader of transition planning. Christie assembled a team of more than 100 researchers and lawyers who generated names of candidates for critical posts for a potential administration. Just after the election, they delivered hundreds of pages that outlined a framework for the new administration. The reports underscored the importance of the Presidential Personnel Office, saying it was essential to, quote, provide the president with outstanding candidates, unquote, according to documents reviewed by the Post. The Christie team estimated the job would require more than 100 people before and after the inauguration, documents show. Well, say what you want about Chris Christie, but he had administered a state before, so he likely had some serious idea of, you'd have to scale up, but he'd have some idea of what it takes to run a government. A larger one than he's ever run, but he'd have an idea. Building a strong team to lead U.S. government agencies is not only critical to the effectiveness of the president, but also for the welfare of the nation, the document said. Well, that was very sensible of him. On November 11th, 2016, Trump fired Christie and his team and relaunched the transition. All the planning, including at least 100 candidates proposed for top jobs and 200 other prospective appointees, was in limbo. The idea that you can take 6 months of work and throw all that out turned out to be a big mistake, Christie said later at a news conference. Well, that's understating things. One official who stayed with the transition and continued working on personnel matters was Sean Ducey, a 28-year-old aide who had joined the campaign in July as a director of research. Ducey had been a low-level staffer in the PPO under Bush and worked for more than 3 years as a human resources and security executive at a small government contractor, according to a financial disclosure filed with the Office of Government Ethics, or OGE. The White House spokesman said Ducey declined to comment for this article. Ducey and the few others working in personnel issues struggled to find volunteers to screen potential nominees, transition and White House officials said. The Obama administration drew on legions of lawyers willing to donate their time and review candidates for the most important Senate-approved nominees, according to former Obama administration officials, and one official involved in the Trump transition. Trump did not have that luxury, partly because he was so critical of the Washington establishment, including traditional Republicans, the officials said. There was also a much smaller pool of candidates to draw on compared with prior administrations. Nobody wants to be a part of this one, of course. In 2009, the Obama Personnel Office had access to a database containing more than 300,000 applicants, while Trump's office had just 87,000, according to Fifner, the GMU scholar. On January 4th, 2017, just 2 weeks before inauguration, Trump named John DeStefano, a GOP political operative, to be director of presidential personnel. He had previously worked as a political director for John Boehner, then Speaker of the House. He also served for 3 years as chief executive of Data Trust, a voter aggregation and analysis firm that catered to Republicans. Voter aggregation and analysis. I wonder if that's essentially, prior to the election, they probably would have told you, or maybe prior to the inauguration, post-election, we do what Cambridge Analytica does. Now, of course, no, something completely different. Anyway, a White House spokesman said DeStefano declined to comment. His appointment was a departure from prior administrations, which placed a premium on management and personnel experience, according to presidential scholars. In 2001 and 2002, for instance, Clay Johnson III served as director of the office under Bush. Johnson, a graduate of Yale and MIT's Sloan School of Management, was then in his middle 50s. He had been Bush's roommate at Yale. That's not such a great qualification. He had also, though, served for a decade as president and chief executive at a mail-order company, as chief operating officer of the Dallas Museum of Art, and 5 years as the director of appointments for Bush when he was governor of Texas. That's a little better. At the start of Obama's first term, the office was headed by Donald Gipps, a graduate of Yale's School of Management, who had previously worked as a chief domestic policy advisor to Vice President Al Gore, and spent a decade as a senior executive at a global telecommunications company, as well as chief of the Federal Communications Commission's International Bureau. Now, DeStefano had to stand up his shop almost from scratch. The Bush and Obama administrations relied on scores of staffers to hasten the screening of nominees and appointees in the first few months, but Trump's personnel team peaked after the inauguration at about 30, White House officials told the Post. Some PPO staff got their jobs in part as thanks for working on the Trump campaign. That does happen. And DeStefano brought at least 2 former Data Trust employees into the office. One is a 2016 college graduate, that's like fairly recent, one might say, who worked as an intern at Data Trust for 4 months and made $62,000 last year as a deputy associate director at the PPO. Her LinkedIn page and the White House salary disclosures show. The other is a 24-year-old who worked at Data Trust for a year and earned $94,000 last year as a special assistant at the PPO, documents show. From the start, Trump's appointments lagged far behind those of prior administrations. By June 20th, 2017, the Senate had confirmed only 44 appointees, compared with 170 for Obama and 130 for Bush in the same time period, according to Fifner. It is a disaster, Walter Schaub, who we just heard from a few minutes ago, former director of the Office of Government Ethics, told the Post. DeStefano and Ducey, who became his deputy, turned to some experienced people from federal agencies for help. When they moved into other jobs, less experienced employees took senior posts in the office, records show. One of the newcomers was one of those names that we have heard before, and we'll catch up with that person and see if you remember when we spoke about her the first time, when we come back from our next break in 2 minutes. We'll be right back and pull back the curtain just a little bit more. Hang on. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. When we last left off, I was teasing you with a memory game, trying to see if you remembered this name, see if it rings a bell. I was searching for this name, I don't know, maybe about a week ago, a couple of days ago, where I was trying to think, I don't know whether we were doing it on the air or whether it was just one of those Twitter conversations, but just trying to think of the various people who had left or been booted out of the White House since Trump took office. And, of course, record numbers, record turnover, etc. But some of the lower level staffers that I remember being kicked out in early days in the White House also kicked out for failure to gain a security clearance. And, we laughed and chuckled about those firings in the early days. And then, of course, it became a much more serious issue as we began to see high-ranking, important people in the White House, like, Jared Kushner, for one thing, and the president's personal assistant, the body man, as they were calling him, and I can't remember that guy's name, but his name came up just a couple of days ago. I'm not even going to bother to look it up. You know who I'm talking about. And both of them, among others, were basically found unclearable. You couldn't get those guys a security clearance because they had too many red flags going on. And I was trying to remember the names of the people who had been booted out for similar reasons many, 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 many months, in fact, more than a year before these stories surfaced. And I was thinking of them because I guess they're just too low level for anyone to have been concerned about keeping them on. They kicked them out for the same reason that Jared Kushner should be kicked out, but won't be because he's Jared effing Kushner, and they can't seem to get rid of that guy. Anyway, this is the name that I was searching for. One of those newcomers to the PPO when the two inexperienced yahoos moved on to bigger and better things was a former Trump campaign worker named Caroline Wiles. Do you remember that name? It's Wiles. I don't know if it's pronounced any other stupid way that you could think of, but it looks an awful lot like Wiles. Wiles, then 30 years old, is the daughter of Susan Wiles. Remember this part of the story? A prominent lobbyist and political operative in Florida. Does that ring a bell for you? Caroline Wiles joined the Trump administration as a deputy assistant to the president and director of scheduling in the White House. Now, news accounts said she was one of 6 White House staffers dismissed for failing FBI background checks. But the White House official would not confirm that. She was eventually, though, booted out of the White House. And I remember that's why I was looking for her name. A failure to pass an FBI background check got her kicked out. Other people likewise had not passed those FBI background checks and could not ever pass those FBI background checks, but they've remained to this day, if you're Jared Kushner, in the White House. No problem for them. Well, anyway, so they had to kick her out. So what'd they do with her? Well, as the beginning of this story suggested, they parked her at the PPO. They didn't fire her from the administration. They just said, you go vet other people who are supposed to get security clearances that you can't qualify for. Go ahead. Okay. Well, so she was moved to the PPO, where she was made a special assistant to the president, a post that typically pays $115,000. Because why not? The younger Wiles has an unusual background for a senior White House official, by the way. On a resume she submitted to the state of Florida, she said she had completed coursework at Flagler College in Florida. On her LinkedIn page, she simply lists Flagler under education. A Flagler spokesman said she never finished her degree. She did not continue her enrollment or graduate from here, said spokesman Brian Thompson. So, that's kind of a big lie or whatever. Wiles has had a string of political jobs, including work at her mother's lobbying firm, where she probably should have stayed, and as a campaign aide for candidates her mother advised, including Florida Governor Rick Scott and, Donald Trump. She also worked for an education organization that helped provide health care to needy students. Over the years, she has had multiple encounters with police, not like donating to the Policeman's Benevolent Fund either. In 2005, she had her driver's license suspended for driving while intoxicated, police records show. In 2007, she was arrested for driving while intoxicated and arrested for passing a, quote, worthless check. She was found guilty of a misdemeanor for driving under the influence. The charge related to the bad check was dropped in a plea agreement. Wiles did not respond to requests for interviews. No surprise there. Another special assistant to the president is Max Miller, 29, a Marine reservist and former Trump campaign worker. He works on the selection and placement of appointees to the Defense Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and Veterans Affairs. At least it makes a certain amount of sense, I guess. Marine reservist, whatever. Miller was introduced to Trump campaign officials by his cousin, Eli Miller, then a senior finance official in the campaign, and now Chief of Staff at the Treasury Department, a Treasury spokeswoman said. On his LinkedIn page, Miller said he attended Cleveland State University from 2007 to 2011. A Cleveland State spokesman confirmed that Miller, who previously attended other schools, graduated in 2013. Okay, that did take a little while, but okay, at least he got it done. Still, you should have it right. Miller described himself on his LinkedIn page as a Marine recruiter and said he worked for the presidential campaigns of Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, of course, and Trump. But after the Post raised questions about his biography, Miller removed the dates of his education and the claim that he was a Marine recruiter. In an interview, he called them mistakes and blamed them on a relative who he said made the LinkedIn page for him. And I didn't even bother to look because, come on. Miller has been charged by police, by the way, in his home state of Ohio with multiple offenses. In 2007, he was charged with assault, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest after punching another male in the back of the head and running away from police. Police records show, as Marines will sometimes do, I guess. He pleaded no contest to 2 misdemeanor charges, and the case was later dismissed as part of a program for first offenders, court records show. In 2009, he was charged with underage drinking, a case that was also later dismissed under a first offenders program. That is to say, he has had 2 charges dismissed under first offenders programs, and how can that possibly be? Well, okay, this is my first drunk driving offense. The other one was my first assault offense. You get one, you get a mulligan on every possible felony, I guess. I don't know. You tell me how that works. And by the way, what are you doing involved in government if you were guilty of underage drinking in 2009? I understand it's now 2018, and that's actually a long period of time, but I'm very old. I'm very tired now. I've been up for a while doing this show. I'm very cranky, and I don't think I should have to put up with people who were underage in 2009 and getting 2 different charges dismissed under the first offender program. That's really getting annoying. I don't think I can take that one. The following year, I don't know whether he was of age at that point or not, but the following year, 2010, I guess, he pleaded guilty to a disorderly conduct charge related to another altercation in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. He couldn't get out of that one because this was at least his second disorderly conduct type charge, right? 2007, he's charged with disorderly conduct and he gets away with it because he's under a first offenders program. By 2010, this is his second offense for disorderly conduct. Can't help you with that one. He gets it dismissed on a special program for second offenders. Really? No. That episode, though, the second one, was related to a fight involving Miller shortly after leaving a hookah bar at about 2 a.m. one morning. That those of you who are into vaping will know that is a creeping Sharia bar, and the guy should be expelled from the United States as a terrorist. During the fight, Miller punched through a glass door, or maybe perhaps the fight was with the glass door. That's possible. Or perhaps he thought the reflection in the glass door was mocking him. Anyway, he cut his wrist and left a trail of blood as he wandered off, the police report said. Guess how they found him? Followed the trail of blood. Okay. In an interview with the Post, Miller acknowledged that his cousin helped him find work with the Trump campaign, but said it was his, quote, work ethic that won him the White House job. Not everybody, I got to tell you something, not everybody, when they see a mocking reflection in a glass door, will take things all the way. I appreciate a guy who's going to punch through a glass door, not just chicken out. So there you go. Work ethic gets the guy the job. He said the arrests several years ago were mistakes that he would not repeat. Okay, at least they were his mistakes. I was just walking down the street and the cops thought I was the guy who punched the glass door because I was bleeding profusely from the wrist and I had priors. But no, okay, they were his mistakes and he owns up to them. Growing up, everyone makes mistakes, he said. Who I was in the past is not who I am now. Oh, all right. I mean, that's what a first offender program is for. And then you had a second offense. But third time's a charm, I guess. The most senior and experienced leader in the office is Katya Bullock. She's certainly senior. I don't know how much experience she has in government, but she's 75 years old. A 75-year-old special assistant to the president who worked in the office under Reagan and both Bush administrations. Oh, okay. So she's a senior citizen, for one. And yes, she actually has lots of experience in this office. That's pretty good. And I guess on average, they're doing great. She joined the Trump administration, or the transition, in December, according to a financial disclosure, and now serves as an administrator, according to people familiar with the office operations. The president recently appointed her to the Federal Salary Council, an advisory board that suggests changes to the government's pay scales. Since Bullock joined the Trump transition, 4 of her family members have passed away. It's very sad. I'm just thinking about this. 75. All right. Well, we're all going to be working at 75 in the future anyway. So, no, 4 of her family members were born. No, they received political appointments to federal agencies. Her son, tell me he's like 60. All right. Well, her son became Deputy Assistant Administrator at the United States Agency for International Development. Hey, USAID. Remember them? His wife is a White House liaison at the Office of Personnel Management. One of their sons, 95, serves as a confidential assistant at the Social Security Administration, agency records show, and another son received an appointment in February as a staff assistant at the Millennium Challenge Corporation, a U.S. foreign aid agency that works to end global poverty. Why? We love poverty. Agency records show. I didn't even really think they believed in ending global poverty, but according to voter research records, all 4 live in the same Kensington home. That is a fun, multi-generational family. And grandma drives to work, too, so that's real exciting. In a brief telephone interview, Bullock said she had no involvement in the appointments of her family members. I'm really sorry about this. Nothing funny about this, but I'm now picturing her on a telephone conversation, and she's got one of those wall-mounted phones that you have to crank. 75 is not that old. My parents are in their early 70s. There's something really funny about having seen that. Like, everybody else is in their 20s, and then it's a sitcom in the making. All right. She doesn't have a crank phone. I'm just kidding. She has a regular phone, and she's very on the ball, I'm sure. But she does say that she had no involvement in the appointment of, what did she say, 4 other family members? Really? You're the head of the presidential personnel office. Was it 4 other relatives, or is it 4 people from the same family? 3 other relatives. What was it? I'm going to go back and look. Yeah, 4 of her family members. So there's 5 of them, and they all live in the same house with the crank phone, not the crank phone on the wall. I have nothing to do with it. We live together. I am the most senior person ever to serve at the presidential personnel office. One day I turned around. I was cranking the phone, getting ready to call Shirley down at the exchange and have her connect me to number 9. And 4 of my relatives just, poof, they showed up. I have no idea how that happened. And I work in a personnel office. I have a hard time believing that one. But there's no point in putting her on trial for this. Who knows whether she'll live through the... All right, enough for the ageist jokes. I'm sorry to all my 75-plus fans. That's probably the total number of fans. I mean the age. It's just... It's incongruous. It's a thing. It's a joke we're making. Okay. So in a brief telephone interview, and she likes to keep them all brief, I'm just saying, she had nothing to do with any of them being appointed. None, she said, adding, I am really not authorized to talk to the press. Her relatives did not respond to requests for interviews. She is not the only PPO official with family ties in the administration. That doesn't surprise anybody. Jimmy Carroll III, age 109, a former deputy chief of staff in the Truman White House, in the Trump White House, who was recently appointed acting director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. You remember that guy? Who was booted out of there. Now we have a new one. Carroll III, James Carroll III, graduated in August of 1892. August of 2017. From Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia, where he was the sports editor of the school newspaper and created a group for Christian men called Men of Virtue, according to his LinkedIn profile. That is hot. The Carrolls did not respond to requests for interviews. In an interview, which they didn't give, somebody else gave, speaking on the condition of anonymity. Wouldn't that be funny if it was James Carroll anyway? I will give you that interview, but I want to be anonymous about myself. Speaking on condition of anonymity, some guy, a White House official, praised Caroline Wiles, the special assistant to the president, saying she had demonstrated her competence as a scheduler and organizer during the Trump campaign. She was always scheduling overlapping drinking and road trips. That was the big problem. Now she's got that problem straightened out. We do feel confident in her ability, the official said. The same official said Miller's experience in the Marine Corps Reserve, quote, speaks volumes to his willingness to serve his country, unquote, and praised his work for the PPO. The official said that nothing in the police records described by the Post would preclude them from working at the PPO. For the positions therein, I'm not aware of any restrictions that the FBI or anyone else would have placed on their appointments, the official said. It simply looks bad, and most presidents wouldn't accept it, but okay. The FBI has no problem with it. The official also said that PPO officials made sure Bullock was not involved in the decisions relating to her family members. They did it, she was blindfolded when they took care of things. There's nobody in the office. There's historically low staffing levels, but it wasn't her. Anyway, she said each of them was qualified by prior experience, participation in the Trump campaign, and their ideological alignment with the president. We want people who are committed and passionate about supporting the president's agenda, the official said. On February 9th, President Trump promoted DeStefano to assistant and counselor to the president, remember that guy, with responsibility for overseeing the offices of presidential personnel, political affairs, and public liaison. An unusual portfolio for one person. They're doubling and tripling up now, I guess. At the same time, Ducey was made day-to-day leader of the PPO and named deputy assistant to the president for presidential personnel. So, that's the situation in the chaotic White House. Just one of dozens of, I don't know, particularly stupid things that happen to be going on over at the White House. Let's see, that leaves us with, I don't know, I guess about 9 minutes or so to wrap up on another story or to put another bug in your ear about new names to watch out for. By the way, more and more coming in on that Elliot Broidy guy, too, and we really need to catch up on him. And believe it or not, we've fallen behind again on Cambridge Analytica. But the other day, just tootling along in Twitter, I noticed a tweet from our own Mark Sumner, Devil's Tower, who tweeted out a story that I stopped on because it was a name that was becoming prominent in the investigations that wasn't familiar to me. And he just tweeted this out. The FBI held former Trump advisor Ted Malloch for questioning this week. That sounded like a big deal. If you don't know Malloch, and I didn't, he was Trump's first choice for EU, European Union, ambassador. He was also the guy who called the EU evil, a German takeover of Europe, and a product of Satan worship. And I'm not really sure whether he really meant it or not, because the weirdo cultists over in Trumpland very frequently really do, I think, genuinely and earnestly accuse Democrats in general of being Satan worshipers, and it's really weird. So he says perfect choice for that, but it didn't tell me very much about who was this guy. And then not that long after, I caught another tweet fly by from who's this? Ali Vaughn or Alia, I don't know. It says Alias basically. It reads Alias Vaughn, and the nickname here Ale that she goes by, and I don't know whether she's Ali and Ali A.S. Vaughn, or is she Alia S. Vaughn? I don't know who this is, but she's a journalist and writer. Where she writes, nobody knows. I mean, probably everywhere. Freelancer like everybody else in the journalism's world. But she's writing a short tweet storm here about Malloch. It's not even really all that short either. And I thought I'd dive into that and then perhaps into the article that she's citing from. And maybe it's her article. That would help me place where she's from. It's in The Guardian here, and I guess I should open it up and take a look and see if maybe her byline is on it, but it doesn't look like it. Now, Stephanie Kirschgessner has got the byline on this. Let me see what Ale, I guess, has to say about this. There is a big update on this. I don't know what it is, but the story on Malloch is true in part. Ooh, juicy. What's the story? So, Malloch told The Guardian that he was detained by FBI agents at Logan Airport in Boston. Then it says not in Cleveland, which is true about Boston, but I don't know what Cleveland had to do with anything, but I guess that might have been an earlier rumor. But this is like the third Trump crony nabbed at an airport after an international flight. So I think if you're a Trump crony, you're going to have to, maybe that's part of the penchant for flying on private aircraft. So they think they might not get picked up at the general aviation terminal. That's a good way to avoid detention by the FBI. Let's see. And she's quoting herself, and I guess in a previous tweet storm, number 5 in a numbered series of tweets. It says down here, this story about Malloch needs to be verified and opportunely dispelled or confirmed soon, because if there's any truth to it, this is big news in terms of Mueller's strategy and investigation. So let's go forward with her tweet storm and see if we can't make long story short here. Malloch told The Guardian he was issued a subpoena. Spicy Files, who's Spicy Files? That's the Twitter handle for, I don't know who, current blogger for Mad Dog Pack. Ah, okay. I see where we're going here. Mad Dog Pack is the creation of one or another of the sort of freelance, kind of, sort of out there guys, approaching Louise Mensch territory here. So now I'll take this with a grain of salt. But on the other hand, I mean, this did strike Mark Sumner as a development of some import. And there is some reporting on this from The Guardian. But all right, I'll go forward with the tweet storm on this, just with a caution here. Malik told The Guardian he was issued a subpoena. Spicy Files checked the system yesterday and there was no subpoena for Malik, so it must be under seal. According to InfoWars lunatics, and shouldn't even bring them up, Malik told them he is to appear before Mueller's grand jury next Friday. The Guardian instead reports Malik told them he was issued a subpoena to testify before Robert Mueller. So InfoWars got creative as usual on the place and events. A subpoena to testify before Mueller would possibly be under seal, so that explains why it wasn't in the system. It wasn't there for the grand jury, I guess. Malik, is all these agents seem to know everything about me. Well, genius, it is Mueller. They even know how many times a day you go to the bathroom. Malik said in a statement to The Guardian that the FBI also asked him about his relationship with Roger Stone and whether he had ever visited the Ecuadorian embassy in London. That would be where Julian Assange is holed up, currently without an internet connection, I think. To put this in context, reminder that per my thread yesterday, Glenn Simpson said in testimony to Congress that Malik is a significant figure in the ties between UKIP, that's Nigel Farage's outfit, Brexit and Cambridge Analytica, and the Trump campaign. Yeah, that kind of reeks of Farage and Assange. Malik is also a Bannon and Stone associate, hence why the FBI asked him about meeting with Assange. FBI agents warned Malik that lying to the FBI is a felony, and you should look at this as the umpteenth Trump associate fool who is going to be indicted for lying to the FBI. Malik told The Guardian he doesn't have any Russia contacts. If he told the FBI agents that, he's done, and the indictment is already being issued as I type. It's evident he does have links, or Mueller wouldn't bother with them. If you want to see the transcript of Simpson's testimony where he mentions Malik, she does provide a link for that. Malik says the experience was bewildering and intimidating at times, and this is what the InfoWars liars are running on. Well, Bozo, when they arrest you and interrogate you, they don't make you sit down for a cup of tea. Grow a pair, she goes on. So, okay, she's really kind of freelancing a little bit on this. But as I mentioned, it's all sort of gleaned from this piece in The Guardian. Again, that piece written by Stephanie Kirschgeisner. The FBI questions Ted Malik, Trump campaign figure and Farage ally. Am I pronouncing Farage correctly, by the way? You can let me know one of these days. This American person, Malik, is once touted as possible ambassador to the EU, tells of being detained at Boston airport and subpoenaed by Robert Mueller's Trump-Russia inquiry. So the fact that he was detained and questioned is, I think, firmly established here by the reporting in The Guardian. Maybe a little bit of freelancing on the point here from Alia Vaughn, but very interesting, and his name does come up a couple of times, and it's probably time to have him on our radar, even if he's not as intimately tied up in all of the various strands of the conspiracy web as they'd have you believe over in certain quarters, let's say, of what has become known, generally speaking, as the resistance. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that guy and return to the air live on Tuesday. I just wanted you to have this wrap up on hand and something to keep you company for the time being, since we couldn't, I really don't think we could have managed a live show, though one of these days we're going to have to do a practice run. We've got some interesting things cooking in the background for what we would do in case of a Mueller firing, either sudden and unexpected or one that came up over the weekend and we were just waiting and biding our time until Monday for the time to comment on it to come around. Anyway, lots more to check in on. And by the way, like I said, lots more to catch up on With respect to Cambridge Analytica, the story continues to develop, and a number of fronts probably require our checking back with them, including one that everybody in Netroots' good friend Boo Man checked in on over at the Boo Man Tribune, revisiting Carter Page and the Rosneft deal, which has sort of been baked into the pie at this point, but probably deserving of a look back, just to see if we can clarify things. We'll try that one on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Greg will be with us to straighten us all out.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, I'll tell you, if Greg can't get us straightened out by Tuesday, Joan certainly can. And for all the news and latest information that we may have either forgotten to round up today or we may miss in the near future, do stay tuned, as always, for the program following us. That's Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.